everybody, welcome to my video today, you guys. Today I'm going to be using this stamp set right here. It is the Colorful Season stamp set, and this is actually in our annual catalog, but it goes so well with all of our holiday stuff, our fall stuff, and I wanted to use this leaf right here to do a couple things. And then I'm going to be using my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, and this video a little bit different than I normally do. I just turned on the camera. I wasn't sure how the card was going to come out, so I turned on the camera and I filmed, and I'm going to be doing a voiceover for all and explaining everything that I did for the card. I really like how it turned out, but it's very different than I normally would have done. I tried out some different techniques. So I hope you will enjoy this video. I hope you enjoy me using a couple different products than I normally do. So let's dive in and get started with this card. Hi guys, let's dive into this card, and I'm going to be going really fast on some of this because the footage was like 40 minutes long. I really just turned on the camera and was creating, and I wasn't worried about it, which is sort of why I don't like doing voiceovers, because I'm kind of really not good at them. So right here, you guys, all I'm doing is I'm using Versamark ink, and I'm stamping on that, and then I'm adding white embossing powder to this craft cardstock. So my original idea was I wanted to do some coloring on craft cardstock, and I took some inspiration from Jennifer McGuire. Of course, I love her. And I had seen a card where she had done some colored pencils, and then she also did some Copic markers onto craft cardstock, and I thought the look was really pretty. So that's kind of where I started. I thought I would go ahead and do this white embossing on the craft cardstock and see how it would go. And this is just that leaf from the Colorful Season stamp set. And right here, I'm kind of a little bit annoyed because I got the stamping too close. Kayla was in here. She was hanging out with me and she was talking to me. And so I was kind of talking like back, and then I got those leaves too close. But it ends up being fine because I took some inspiration from another Jennifer McGuire video and ended up doing where I cut some of it off. I do some split coloring type thing, and so it ends up working out fine. So I'm just going to continue to do that. I'm covering the whole piece of cardstock with these leaves, and then we're going to color them. So if you move pretty fast, you can do multiple stamps with the Versamark at once. Sometimes I just add the powder and melt it just so I can see where everything is at. But with the craft cardstock, you can see it pretty well. So I'm using a snappy tray right here, and it's just a little embossing tray that I use that catches all of the powder, and then I can put it back into the containers. So you just see here, it's melting that white powder onto the craft cardstock. So then it's all done, and I got some powder in different places, but I really wasn't worried about it because I knew I was going to be covering some stuff up. So I just went ahead and I cut down that piece, which ended up working out fine because I cut off that piece that I got too close. The leaves were too close. So these are the Clean Color Zig markers, and you can add water to these markers, and they do great for watercoloring. I actually like these markers better than I like Copics. I feel like I can control them better, which is, I think, the opposite of how most people feel. Most people like the control of Copics rather than these because they are a little bit hard to get used to. They are a real brush, so it's like having a paintbrush on the end of a marker, and they're very, the ink part is typically very juicy. So this color right here, I picked out some colors that I thought would work really well for fall. And this color in particular is one of my favorite colors, and it happens to be a little bit drier. It came a little bit drier when I got the package. So when I purchased these, I purchased them in a 60, the box of 60. They didn't have a box of 80 at the time. They recently have come out with the entire collection, which is actually cheaper than what I got the 60 count for. So that's okay. I've linked to this on my website. I got them through Amazon, and they are relatively expensive. They are a good investment, but I really like them. And in this case, where I'm using this on the craft cardstock, I feel like I did try using pencils, but I just didn't like the way it came out. And I feel like this is a really strong color. And so it goes on that craft cardstock. The way it's interacting with the craft cardstock is really, really nice. So I just decided to go ahead and color in these leaves, and I'm obviously coloring a lot faster. This is sped up. So it did take me a little bit of time. So this was a labor intensive card, which most of you guys know that I don't like doing things that are labor intensive when it comes to my cards. But I think that the way the card ended up coming out ended up being really beautiful. And so I don't mind that it took a little bit of extra time to do this. So what I'll end up doing is just rotating the colors. I zoom in here so you guys can see a little bit closer. I'm just going in between all of the embossed, that white embossing, and I actually really love this yellow color. I think it's probably one of my favorite colors of the zig colors, and these are actually a lot darker because it's on craft cardstock. When you use the zig markers on like white or water paper, they tend to be very bright, and you really have to layer a lot of color on them for them to be darker. So using them on this craft cardstock is definitely making them turn out a little bit darker, which is perfect. I don't think the card would have worked the same with these kinds of markers if I had done it on white or watercolor paper. So that's the other thing I recommend, is if you're mixing these with water, if you're doing a watercolor look and you're using these markers, to use a really good watercolor paper. Because the way that they blend and the way they mix is really unique. And I had to play around a little bit with these when I first got them so that I could figure out kind of the feel of them and like how I felt like they worked best. So as I'm doing this, I'm kind of just taking my finger and wiping off the white part. It's really easy to stay within those little areas, but I just kind of take my finger and wipe off the white if I get any of that color on the embossing. And even if you do, it's not necessarily a really big deal. It makes that white a little bit, it mutes it a little bit, but it's totally fine. So I did like the way that this turned out, and I would do it again. I would use the craft cardstock again. I did link some craft cardstock on my website. This is Stampin' Up! Craft cardstock. It was our 12 by 12 sheets that we had last year, and I stocked up on those when I realized that we weren't going to be selling it anymore. So here off one of the pieces that I cut, I kind of was testing a couple colors. That's the other thing that I suggest, is whenever you're doing this, this was a pretty labor intensive card and I didn't want to have to start over. So I just took one of those pieces that I had cut down and then I did a little test on it. So I ended up using maybe 4 colors. So I used this color that looks like Bermuda Bay. It's really close to Bermuda Bay. And then I used the yellow color, which I would say is probably close to, do you guys remember the old color we had, more mustard? I feel like it's closer to that color. And then there's a reddish orange color that is kind of like Cajun Craze. And then I think at the very end, I use a orange that's kind of like pumpkin pie. So I just tried to pick fall colors that would show up on here that would look good. And then I just rotated them. I didn't want them right next to each other. So then at the very end here, I'm also going to add a little bit of shimmer to this. That will be the next thing that I do. And you see right here is like this yellow color that looks really good on there. So I don't use the Wink of Stella. I actually use the Spectrum Noir paint little glimmer brush, and they work basically the same. I had gotten one to try it out to see if it was similar, and it is. So I just add a little bit of glimmer over the top of this, and that makes it really nice. And then you see there, I'm just kind of wiping that off. It wipes off that embossing powder really nicely. So let's dive in here to when I use that glitter pen on there. That just adds a little bit of shimmer, and I just went right over the white and I didn't even think twice about it. I did each color leaf that I was working with. So this one you see is the red, orangish, or no, that yellow piece. So then I went right to the next yellow because this will reactivate that ink. So then I just wiped the tip of the brush off on the paper, and then I would move to the next color, and that way it didn't mix colors. I don't think it would have mattered too much, but I just wanted to be careful. And I feel like adding this glimmer really tied it all together, smoothed that color out, and gave it that final touch. So I really liked that. So at this point, I really was not sure exactly how I was going to put the card together. I kind of had a little bit of an idea, but I really wasn't sure if it would work. So you're going to see here I start cutting some cardstock in a minute after I get all this glimmer added, and then we just dive into it. So I really encourage you just to do that sometimes. If you're not sure, just go ahead and try it. I thought the worst that could happen is I would have this really beautiful colored leaf piece, and then I could do something else with it if the idea didn't work out. So I want to go ahead and start with a card base of craft cardstock. So after I get this all done, and I just wanted to show you the glimmer actually showed up better on camera than I thought it was showing up. So I'm just going to take my trimmer and I'm going to cut oh, right here, I just was getting off. I smeared it a little bit, so I'm just using an eraser to kind of move that ink away. So right here, I'm trimming this piece down, and then I'm going to trim some another piece of craft for my card base. And so this is just 4.5. I'm sorry, it's 4.25 by 5.5, and that is a card front. And then this white piece I trim down so that the inside of my card is white. This is some thick Whisper white cardstock, so it's going to make a really nice card base. And I just use my bone folder and I give that a nice crease, and then I'm going to add this craft cardstock right on top of the white. I'm using my snail, and you notice I put a lot of adhesive on this, and I don't know if that was necessary, but I was afraid everything would not stay attached since there were going to be so many layers. So I add that, and then you will see later on I kind of trim a little bit of that white off the bottom and the top. But then here's where I start to try to figure out how I want to put this together. I've trimmed those two pieces apart, and then I want to put my sentiment in the middle, and I will grab some cardstock and I try to figure out, like, do I want a card base? Is there something that's going to look nice with this? So like I could have a mat. I wanted to use that copper foil. I'm just like itching to use that copper foiling for some reason. Like I keep every project I do, I keep grabbing that foil out and trying to use it. Maybe I need to let it go, and maybe something else later on will work for it, but I just want to use it so bad. So here I've cut a piece of Bermuda Bay, a strip, and I'm going to put my sentiment on that. And then here's my Big Shot. So I have had a couple questions about the Big Shot and how it works and when you're using dies and whatnot. So this is the die cut machine, and you see in that really bright spot right there, I have a die. And so all you do is you make a little sandwich of some platforms. You put your paper, or in this case I'm using copper foiling, and you put that down. I need to add one more plate here. You put that down, and then you cut through it. So I'm struggling here a little bit. I was getting a little frustrated because I couldn't figure out why it wasn't cutting, and then I realized I just needed one certain plate. So I left this in so you could see that it's just about making that sandwich. You just put those plates together, you layer your paper down, and then you layer your die, and then see, easy as pie, it does come out. Those struggles there in the beginning was just because I did not have the correct plates together. But I love being able to have this machine because it's easy to just pull this out and make my dies. So I'm going to cut several of these. I think I end up cutting 5 of the little leaves. I don't end up using them, but originally I had thought that I would layer them together. So I'll finish cutting those pieces out, and then right here you're looking at the sentiment that I'm going to use. I used a stamp set called Orange Blossom, and what I'm going to do is stamp on this strip, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how I had thought about using those leaves that I just cut out. So I cut my sentiment apart. I know that's kind of scary, but I just cut that sentiment apart. It was stacked, and I wanted it to be one long sentiment. So I went ahead and I did that, and then I'm just using Memento black ink to go ahead and stamp on there. And I think I kind of stamp it crooked to begin with, and I flip it over and I get right in the camera. I'm sorry about that, guys. So I end up flipping it over, and I don't do a great job stamping it, but it's okay. End up going with it. I was kind of frustrated a little bit that I didn't stamp it great the second time, but I thought, well, maybe nobody will notice. So I stamped that all in one line instead of stacked, and then I'm going to put that in the middle of the card, and then I will show you those little copper leaves, which I ended up keeping. Even though I didn't use them, I ended up keeping them. So I'm going to add foam to these two pieces, and I popped those up, and then you see my sentiment right there in the middle, and then I have foam know, my camera stopped filming or I didn't hit film again. And then I had wanted to use these like this, and it didn't work. Like I just couldn't make it work. So I grabbed this Sharpie, and it's a copper Sharpie. And I thought, well, I'll either do white dots or I'll do copper dots, which are more bronzy looking. And you can't quite see them at this point, but I will show them to you. And I just kind of do little dots. It kind of fills in all these spots. Like I felt like I needed a little something to fill those in, and I didn't quite have something. So these dots do that. And I think maybe the white would have looked good too. I think either one would have looked good. I like the way the copper ones look. I think I got carried away. Like I started doing the dots and then I couldn't stop. And I kept thinking, just stop. It's totally fine. Just stop. But I kept doing it. So then the very top, I wanted to add something to the top because I felt like there was this space and it wasn't clear exactly what it was supposed to be. So I cut some linen thread and then some of this jute twine that's in the holiday catalog. And I end up using the thicker piece here, and that really tied it in. It gave it more balance on the top. I just tie a bow and then I trim it up. But I felt like that was like it just balanced it. I felt like it really did need something on the top. So both of these ideas came from Jennifer McGuire. They're both videos that I saw, and I kind of thought I wanted to put them together. It's very different than I normally do and a lot more labor intensive. I worked on it for about an hour. My footage was about 40 minutes. And so it was definitely more than I usually do, but it was fun. So here I wanted to show you the difference of like what it would look like with the white dots compared to what it looked like with the copper dots. And I don't know, you guys tell me, what do you think looks better? So here's the finished card. I hope you enjoyed seeing it. This was a much longer video than I normally do. So all the supplies are listed in the YouTube description below or over on my website. I appreciate you guys so much for hanging out with me while I did this, and I hope you enjoyed the voiceover. I will be back later this week to share with you guys some more projects, and I hope you're having a wonderful day.